The year is 1962. Nebraska Athletic Director Tippy Dye's assignment, hire a new football coach. His pick is Bob Devaney, who in 5 years at the University of Wyoming won 4 Skyline Conference titles. Devaney's debut on September 22, 1962 in Memorial Stadium, which at the time had a seating capacity of just 37,500. And his Cornhuskers routed undermanned South Dakota 53-0. But it got tougher quickly. The following week, the Huskers traveled to Ann Arbor, Michigan to take on the powerful Wolverines.
This was the game that our season really hung on to. Prior to the Michigan game, our big thought and point was to try to give the team the confidence and make them think they could beat Michigan. There were a lot of doubt that we could beat Michigan in Ann Arbor, which is not done too often. So I think it was probably a mental factor or emotional factor. And I believed after watching Michigan films the previous year, I thought we had a team that should beat Michigan and could beat Michigan, so we built them up to that point. And we were proven right. We did win at Michigan. It was a good ball game. I think it surprised a lot of people, perhaps even some of our own, and it got us rolling that year, and I think it led to a good season.
As usual, Coach Bob Devaney right on target. It was no fluke that Saturday before 70,000 at Ann Arbor. Quarterback Denny Claridge hit 6 of 12 passes for 89 yards. Halfback Dennis Dewey led all rushers with 80 yards. And fullback Bill Thunder Thornton, 2 touchdowns and vicious blocking to the day, was named Back of the Week. Bob Devaney gained Coach of the Week honors as mighty Michigan fell to the Cornhuskers of Nebraska, 25-13. Iowa State was next. Nebraska made it 3 in a row with a 36-22 win over the Cyclones, its first Big 8 test of the year. Halfback Warren Powers goes in from the 3. Then it was North Carolina State, and it took a great last-ditch drive to topple an inspired North Carolina State Wolfpack. With nearly 14 minutes of the final period gone, halfback Denny Stewie carries it in for a 19-14 win. And now Kansas State. Here quarterback Denny Claridge spots Dick Callahan, hits him with a 37-yard strike as the Huskers post their 5th win in a row. Colorado's Golden Buffaloes are next. The following week in Boulder, the Huskers turn it on in the second half. Rudy Johnson goes in from 30 yards out. Now Claridge keeps the ball. Nearly loses it as he nears the goal line, but pulls it back to score. Always tough Missouri. With 36,000 homecoming fans on hand, Nebraska made its bid for Big 8 leadership against the rugged Tigers. Noel Martin pirates a Missouri pass and races 88 yards to score. It was a 7-7 tie at halftime. The Husker defense held the Tigers to just 38 yards rushing the second half. No simple chore against the Johnny Rollin pace Bengals. But Missouri had a Gibraltar defense of its own. Missouri, capitalizing on Nebraska miscues, notches a final 16-7 win. The Huskers' first loss of the year. Bouncing back, the Cornhuskers blast Kansas 40-16, then take on the Cowboys of Oklahoma State. The Scarlet defense dominates, allowing the Pokes into Husker territory just once all afternoon. Nebraska shuts out Oklahoma State 14-0, but lose to the Oklahoma Sooners the following week. However, the season doesn't end there. Bob Devaney's 8-2 team is invited to the Gotham Bowl in New York to meet the Miami Hurricanes.
The Gotham Bowl was not a real prosperous operation, so that brought up the point where we're sitting out in the runway there, waiting till the money was put in escrow, so at least we knew that we were going to have expenses to go to New York and back and play the football game.
A national TV audience looking on, but few fans in the stands. The Huskers, with Willie the Twister Ross having an especially good day, take an exciting 36-34 win to cap off 1962. 1963. The question, can Bob Devaney equal or improve on his 9-2 first year? The opener is no contest. South Dakota State falls 58-7. The second week, north to Minnesota. 5,000 Nebraska fans follow and cheer as former Minnesota All-Stater Dennis Claridge takes the ball around left end for a TD. Then, with the game tied 7-7, Claridge spots sophomore end Tony Jeter behind the Minnesota safety and throws a perfect strike. Jeter outlegs all pursuers for the winning score. Back home to take on the Iowa State Cyclones. Nebraska needed this tally by Claridge. Then this sparkling 36-yard jaunt by Kent McClune that set up another score. Claridge spins, rolls right, squeezes into the end zone for his second TD, and the Huskers win 21-7. The Cornhuskers are 3-0 when a fired-up Air Force team comes to Lincoln. Trailing 7-0 at intermission, the Huskers battle back. Fullback Rudy Johnson breaks a brilliant 76-yard dash to the end zone. But the Falcons pull out the win in the final minutes and hand Nebraska its first and what will be its only loss of the year. Kansas State at Manhattan, Kansas. And with Denny Claridge hobbled by a sprained ankle, sophomore quarterback Fred Duda gets his first college start and guides the Cornhuskers to win number 4. Duda here taking it in from the 7. And the Huskers are back on the win track, 28-6. Eddie Crowder's Buffaloes gave homecoming fans at Memorial Stadium an early scare with his touchdown pass. But the Huskers answered with a scoring blitz. Maynard Schmidt rams one over in a 41-6 rout. Columbia, Missouri. The Huskers hoping to avenge that 1962 loss in Lincoln. And in a fine display of ball control, Bob Devaney's Cornhuskers roar 76 yards to score in 11 plays after taking the opening kickoff. And it stayed close. The Cornhuskers held a 13-6 lead. Then Missouri's all-conference quarterback Gary Lane connected on this 53-yard pass, and it's 13-12 Nebraska. The Tigers elect to go for 2, and watch Huskers' Bruce Smith make a game-saving block of the Missouri pass to preserve a 13-12 win. The Kansas Jayhawks. Fred Duda's specialty, the option, and this one for 7 yards gets the Huskers on the board against the Jayhawks. But just when the crowd thought KU was in a real hole at their own 1-yard line, All-America Gale Sayers, the Omaha Flash, tore 99 yards down the sidelines for a record run. But Nebraska kept its poise. Willie the Twister Ross goes in from the 8 and made sure the official had a ground's eye view of the action. Then on the first play after the following kickoff, Bob Hahn picks off this KU pass and goes all the way. And the Huskers notch one more win, 23-9. Next up, Oklahoma State at Stillwater. And there, the number 6 ranked Cornhuskers had things all their own way for the first 3 quarters. But then had to hang on for dear life. They claim a 20-16 victory. The final game of the 1963 season with Oklahoma was played under solemn circumstances. President John F. Kennedy had just been assassinated.
But certainly we were all shocked with the death of President Kennedy. I talked to Bud Wilkinson, who was then coach at the University of Oklahoma, who was pretty well acquainted with President Kennedy, and he had worked with him on some projects, physical fitness type things. And I asked Bud what he thought the president would want, knowing him pretty well. He said he felt sure that the president would want that game to go on. And we did receive some mild criticism for playing the game on that day. A great many schools did cancel their games on that day, but some did play, and we were among those that did play, and we felt not comfortable, but we felt we were doing the thing, as Bud said, that President Kennedy would have wanted us to do.
Nebraska won the game, and its first conference title in 23 years. The Huskers accepted an invitation to play Auburn in the Orange Bowl. And on the second play of the game, Denny Claridge sprinted to the right. All-American guard Bob Brown and All-Big 8 tackle Lloyd Voss opened a gaping hole, and Claridge rambled 68 yards to score. Dave Tyson's toe added a pair of field goals and gave the Huskers a 13-0 halftime lead. Auburn scored from its shotgun formation in the third quarter. A titanic struggle, but Nebraska won the Orange Bowl trophy and completed a fine 10-1 season. The 1964 Husker squad seems to have the potential to be a solid contender. And in the opener, South Dakota offered little resistance as the Cornhuskers roll. Halfback Kent McClune goes in from 25 yards out. The season is off with a bang, and the Huskers are all smiles. Game 2 is at Minnesota, and Nebraska stages a sensational comeback. Light horse Harry Wilson takes a pitch from Duda, fights his way down to the 28-yard line. 7:52 left to play, trailing 21-12. Fred Duda spots fullback Frankie Solich behind the Minnesota safety and rifles a 45-yard scoring pass. The Huskers still trailing 21-19. Duda hits Bob Hahn, who lugs the ball to the 18. Then on the next play, Duda again goes to the air. The ball rips to the hands of a Gopher defender, skitters off his helmet, and into the hands of Kent McClune, who plows through 2 defenders for the winning score. At Ames, sophomore quarterback Bob Churchage comes in to lead the Huskers when Fred Duda suffers a broken leg in the early going. Churchage plunges across to cap a 48-yard drive. Nebraska wins its 3rd game of the season, its 10th victory in a row. South Carolina, and Bob Churchage settles firmly into the role as Duda's successor with a 50-yard strike to win Preston Love. Now on the defensive side, watch Langston Coleman blitz the quarterback. Bob Hahn, on a deep reverse, turns the corner and runs wild with the Gamecock defenders. And it's Harry Wilson tacking on the final touchdown. The final score, the Huskers 28, South Carolina 6. A homecoming crowd of nearly 46,000 comes to its feet as Kent McClune swings Kansas State's left end and is off on a 69-yard touchdown jaunt. Cornhusker tackle Dick Zapp crashes through to block an attempted quick kick. Finally, Churchich to McClune for one more Husker tally and a 47-0 Husker shutout. Over 12,000 Nebraskans migrated to Boulder, Colorado, and saw McClune again prove his proficiency as a snagger of deflected passes. An awesome Husker defense holds Colorado to a -3 yards rushing for the day. Churchich connects with end Tony Jeter on this play that carries to the 5. And the Huskers go on to post a 21-3 win in the Rockies. It's Halloween Day. Missouri's Tigers are in Lincoln. Churchich uncorks a long one to Freeman White. But it's still a 0-0 battle until this play. Langston Coleman dumps Gary Lane in the end zone for a safety. The Huskers keep charging, but the Missouri defense keeps them at bay. Huskers able to move the football, but still are never able to put more points on the board. Until with 6:32 left in the game, Churchich eludes a hard Tiger rush, escapes would-be tacklers, fires to McClune along the west sidelines. All-American tackle Larry Kramer peels Johnny Rowland off McClune with a shattering block, and the speedster from Broken Bow is gone for the 37-yard clincher. Nebraska 9, Missouri 0. Lawrence, Kansas. Bob Churchich gets things going with a pass from his own end zone to receiver Freeman White, who proceeds to outleg all KU defenders. A 92-yard touchdown play. The Jayhawks come back to knot the score at 7-7, but then the Huskers also come back. This sparkling run by co-captain Bob Hahn sets up their score. The Husker defense had to hold off a ferocious Jayhawk bid in the final quarter. But the final score, the Huskers 14, Kansas 7. 49,013. At that time, the largest crowd ever to witness any event in Nebraska. Watch the Big Red take on Oklahoma State. After the Cowboys forge a 7-7 tie in the second quarter, Frank Solich takes the ensuing kickoff, and watch him go. Straight up the middle. 89 yards and a TD. Still in the second quarter, Churchich, pursued by a host of Cowboys, gets his pass off to Harry Wilson, who sprints in for the score. The undefeated Cornhuskers now possess the nation's longest winning streak, 16 games. Kent McClune in for the final touchdown, and the final score, 27-14. But it's time to go down to Norman. Now it's Norman, Oklahoma. The always powerful Sooners playing near-perfect ball dash Nebraska's hope for an unbeaten season. But the Huskers end up 9-1 and capture their second Big 8 title. Here Freeman White grabs a pass and goes 56 yards for the Huskers' lone touchdown of the day. One Husker fan is delighted, but it's not enough. The Sooners win it 17-7. The Cotton Bowl invites the Huskers to Dallas to meet Frank Broyles' unbeaten Arkansas team. Bob Churchich drives his team down the field. Light horse Harry Wilson bangs in from the 1, and Duncan Drum's kick makes it 7-3 Nebraska. A score that would stand up until just 4:41 remained in the game. The defense was bolstered by the likes of John Strohmeyer, Walt Barnes, and Larry Wachholz. They gave it their best shot, but some of the breaks the Huskers could have used just didn't happen, and Arkansas won the day. A great bowl effort and another fine year for Bob Devaney's forces, who would wind up 6th in the nation in both the Associated Press and the UPI final polls. (1965), and after 2 consecutive Big 8 championships and 2 9-1 seasons, plus 3 straight bowl trips, the experts tabbed Nebraska for a national title. And in their opener here against Texas Christian, they live up to expectations. All-American end Freeman White, catching a pair of TD passes, almost runs out of the stadium with this one. Freeman sets an NU record with 8 receptions for the day. The Black Shirts keep the pressure on the Horned Frogs quarterback. And watch Bill Johnson pick off a TCU aerial, take it all the way back to the end zone. Final score, Nebraska 34, Texas Christian 14. Now the Cornhuskers take to the road against the Air Force at Colorado Springs. And on the first play of the game, Frank Solich tears to the line on his way to an 80-yard touchdown run. For the day, Solich racks up a total of 205 yards and 3 touchdowns. And watch him on this one. Just as he seems to be stopped cold at the line, he squirms loose and sprints 41 yards for the score. The Huskers win it 27-17. Back home again, this time against Iowa State. A year earlier, number 10 Fred Duda had received a broken leg in this game and was feared he might never play again. Not so, as Husker fans quickly discovered. Here Duda throws to All-American end Tony Jeter, who fumbles the ball into the hands of a Cyclone at the goal line, who then is tackled for a safety by an alert Pete Tatman. Harry Wilson breaks for a long gainer. Wilson, the game's leading rusher. And Duda again, perhaps making up for what he might have gotten a year before, rolls right for the game's final touchdown. The Huskers coast to a big shutout, 44-0. Now Nebraska entertains the Wisconsin Badgers, hoping to keep intact Coach Bob Devaney's mark of never losing to a Big Ten team. And the specialty teams with pressure like this make it a good day for Husker fans. Sophomore Charlie Winters wrestles the ball loose from 2 defenders and just misses getting into the end zone. Pete Tatman completes the play, banging over from the 1. Now, watch this slick keeper by Fred Duda. 2 fake pitch outs and 59 yards to pay dirt. That broken leg didn't seem to cost him any speed. Duda outruns the defenders. Nebraska has its 2nd straight shutout, a convincing 37-0 win. Easy to see why Herbie Husker's flexing his muscles and feeling so good about his team. Now Kansas State at Manhattan, where the Wildcats managed to hold Nebraska scoreless for a quarter. But Fred Duda pumped up the Big Red Machine first on the ground, then went to the air on this little comeback pass to move it in close against the Wildcats. One more pass took the Huskers just barely short of the goal line. On the next play, Pete Tatman took it in, and the Huskers never looked back. Their 3rd straight shutout, 41-0 over K-State. Colorado and homecoming again. Watch this 3rd and 8 play. Duda lofts the pass to Freeman White, who takes it in full stride for a record-setting 95-yard touchdown play. A play that broke open the tight game, and the Huskers go on to win it 38-13. Columbia, Missouri, where the Tigers jumped to a 14-0 first quarter lead before the Huskers knew what hit them. Nebraska finally gets it going with a pass. Then it's Harry Wilson who got the Big Red really back into it. A 37-yard scamper all the way to the Missouri 1-yard line. Pete Tatman bowls over, and the Huskers are back in the game. Now Fred Duda fools the Tigers on a 4th down play at the Missouri 39. Sends Solich into the middle where the Tigers are jammed, keeps the ball, circles his left end, and races to the 1-yard line. Again, Tatman from the 1, over the goal line, and it's 14-13 Missouri. But kicking specialist Larry Wachholz somehow missed the point, and Nebraska needed to score again. The defense did its job, shutting off the Tigers with an interception to stop a Missouri drive. And now Wachholz, with 5:56 remaining, boots the field goal to give the Huskers an exciting win, 16-14. The Cornhuskers back home to take on the Kansas Jayhawks in Lincoln, and playing what Coach Bob Devaney later would term their best game of the year. Nebraska rolling up an impressive 510 yards of total offense. Ron Kirkland, with one of those days halfbacks dream about, led all rushers with 147 yards. Everything worked, and Nebraska cruises to a 42-6 victory. It really took some doing for the Cornhuskers to register win number 9. Oklahoma State's Cowboys were up 17-14 with just 5:18 left in the game. Harry Wilson comes up with some must yardage for the Cornhuskers. Nebraska at the 2. With the ever-dependable Pete Tatman bulldozes in, Nebraska leads 21-17 with 2:38 remaining, but Cowboy Walt Garrison, the last play of the game, nearly pulls it out with this 18-yard run. Bill Johnson tackles him just short of the end zone, and the Huskers win 21-17. At home, their season record now 9-0. The Huskers find themselves trailing Oklahoma 9-0 in the second quarter. With 4th and 2 at the OU 29, Charlie Choo-Choo Winters breaks through a bevy of tacklers, wins the race to the goal line. In the third quarter, Harry Wilson brought Memorial Stadium to its collective feet as he breaks loose at his own 34, goes 66 yards to score. And quarterback Bob Churchich helps wrap up Nebraska's 3rd straight Big 8 title with this strike to Wilson, a 21-9 win over the Sooners. The Orange Bowl, unbeaten Nebraska, ranked number 3 in the polls, takes on Bear Bryant's Alabama team.
Bobby Churchich come in later in the game, did a great job throwing the ball to Freeman White and Tony Jeter, and we got back in the game. I know this, that Steve Sloan, who was not a great passer, but nobody told him he wasn't, and he threw passes to the present coach and athletic director, Ray Perkins, and to Dennis Holman, and this group just really passed us right out of the park.
The Cornhuskers become the 3rd of the top 3 teams to fall that New Year's Day. Alabama capturing national honors by virtue of its win over Nebraska. The Huskers open 1966 against improved Texas Christian. This Bob Churchich to Denny Morrison pass breaks a 7-7 deadlock, and the Huskers lead at 14-7. Then Kay Karstens picks off a Texas Christian pass, brings it back, and the Huskers go on to post a 14-10 win. Utah State was next, and they also gave the Huskers a real battle. All-American middle guard Wayne Malin, safety Larry Wachholz teamed up to turn things around. Watch now as Wachholz fields this Aggie punt. Drifts off to his left side. Looks like he's hemmed in. Then turns the corner and takes it back all the way. The Huskers break it open and go on to win it 28-7 over Utah State. Iowa State in the first road trip. The place is Ames, Iowa. The game tied 6-6. Harry Wilson blasting off left tackle, shaking off tacklers, rips clear for the winning touchdown, and Nebraska latches on to a 12-6 victory at Ames over the Cyclones. Huskers continue on the road, this time to Madison, Wisconsin. Dick Davis punches through for a good gain. And the Big Red continues to find the going fine as they move down the field. Paul Critchlow gets the final counter in a 31-3 win at Madison. A record crowd of 64,108 fans looking on as the Huskers take on Kansas State. Churchich to Denny Morrison. Then, as the Huskers move down the field in close, Pete Tatman booms in from the Wildcat 5-yard line. Watch now as middle guard Wayne Malin crunches through. Blocks a Wildcat punt, chases it down, finally recovers it in the end zone for another Husker TD. Final score 21-10. Colorado Boulder and the scene of another great Cornhusker comeback. The Buffs in the air go out in front 19-7 on plays like this. But Bob Churchich rallies his team, moves them closer. A pass to Denny Morrison. Morrison once again, this time for the touchdown, and the Huskers have cut the margin to 19-14. 2 minutes, 32 seconds left to play. Churchich continues to lead the charge, hitting on a series of passes. Finally, with 53 seconds to go, Pete Tatman over the goal line, and a great Husker win 21-19. Against Missouri and Lincoln, the Cornhuskers unleash a devastating attack against the Tigers. Maybe their finest all-around performance of the season. Touchdowns, a rule of the day. Here, Ben Gregory receives the pitch out and scores from 16 yards out. The Huskers totaled 336 yards in offense, and the Black Shirts record a shutout. Final, 35-0 Nebraska over the Tigers. The following week in Lawrence, Nebraska bombed Kansas early. Quarterback Bob Churchich showing good foot as he scampers 27 yards for a touchdown. The Jayhawks simply no match for Nebraska's balanced attack. And the final, Huskers 24, Kansas 13. The fireworks started early in Lincoln the following week, a bruising 10-yard blast by Ben Gregory as the Cornhuskers clinched their fourth straight Big 8 title with a decisive win over Oklahoma State. When it was all over, the scoreboard read Nebraska 21, the Cowboys 6. Then down in Norman, the Oklahoma Sooners once again spoiled Nebraska's hopes for a perfect season. The Huskers picked up 76 yards in the air. Ben Gregory showed the Sooners some great power running, 109 yards on the ground. And Dick Davis, the only Nebraska touchdown from 2 yards out. But it wasn't enough, and the Sooners squeezed by 10-9. January 1st, the Sugar Bowl. Nebraska's hopes for a revenge victory over Alabama end abruptly. But after this game, Coach Bob Devaney called Bear Bryant's Alabama squad the best college team he had ever seen. (1967), the season opener in Seattle. The Cornhuskers an unknown quantity against favored Washington. But 6'5" rookie quarterback Frank Patrick takes the Huskers 43 yards to score in 9 plays. And the Huskers upset the Huskies for their first win of the year. Minnesota, and the first time before the home folks. Again, quarterback Frank Patrick engineering a drive from the Huskers 6-yard line with a big play like this one. A scamper by Dick Davis that covers an awful lot of green. First down at the Gopher 25. Joe Orduna rips through left tackle and high steps his way in with a touchdown that wins it for Nebraska. Final 7-0. Following a come-from-behind win over Kansas State at Manhattan the previous week, the Huskers come to Lawrence, and Nebraska finds it can't escape 2 straight ambushes in the Sunflower State. NU quarterback Frank Patrick tossing completed passes to Tom Penny and Tom Lindstreth. But the Husker aerial attack was simply not enough. It was the first time a Bob Devaney team had been shut out, and it snapped a Husker scoring string that went back to the 9th game of 1961. Final, the Jayhawks 10, the Huskers nothing. Both Colorado and Nebraska had been on a collision course for a year after NU's squeaker at Boulder in 1966. The fans were hardly in their seats before Colorado fumbled, and Nebraska quickly drove 43 yards to score. After a toss to Denny Morrison, quarterback Frank Patrick hit Ben Gregory with a 17-yard touchdown pass. But even though the Huskers had a big edge in total yards, 402 to 182, it was Colorado's football game, 21-16. After 2 straight Big 8 defeats, the Cornhuskers came out smoking against TCU, scoring twice in the first quarter, capitalizing on a fumble. Frank Patrick passed 5 yards to Dennis Richnowski for the Huskers' first touchdown. Then Patrick finds Dick Davis open for another 21-yard touchdown pass. The rout continued as Nebraska was back on the win track, 29-0. Supposedly weak Iowa State was anything but easy. The Huskers had to work hard for their second straight shutout. Again, the defense sparkled, limiting the Cyclones to a -5 yards rushing and a total offense net of only 82 yards. Quarterback Frank Patrick engineered a 41-yard scoring drive after a pass interception. Blitzed the Cyclones with his precision passing. Added some fine running on his own. Almost squeezes in this time. Then caps the drive with a touchdown sneak from a yard out. For the Cyclones, nothing went right. After stalling the Huskers at the 1, a Cyclone was tackled in the end zone by Frank Avolio to top off NU's shutout. Nebraska had difficulty scoring against Oklahoma State, but they moved the ball well and staged another great defensive show. The Cornhuskers raced for 250 yards while holding the Cowboys to a mere 37. Ben Gregory wound up with 120 yards. Joe Orduna had 78. The Huskers broke open a scoreless duel in the second quarter. Frank Patrick 4 yards to Dennis Richnowski for the touchdown. Nebraska had shutout number 4. The Missouri Tigers gave Nebraska all they could handle. NU managed only 11 yards rushing for the game, the lowest ever total for a Bob Devaney team. There were a few bright spots. Frank Patrick to Dennis Richnowski, and a toss to Joe Orduna for Nebraska's only touchdown. But the final score, Missouri the winner, 10-7. Now Oklahoma. With a national TV audience looking on, Nebraska tried valiantly to derail the title-bound Sooners. Dick Davis raced for a total of 127 yards.
Our 67 team was not a bad team. We lost a lot of close games. We could have gone to a smaller bowl. But we didn't feel that our team had played well enough that they deserved to go to a bowl, or that we had coached well enough to go to a bowl.
One bright spot, middle guard Wayne Malin again named All-America. But for the most part, Nebraska fans had to content themselves to looking forward to 1968. Final Oklahoma 21-14. 1968, Wyoming in the opening game of the year. Senior quarterback Ernie Sigler off the bench to engineer a 71-yard scoring drive. A 17-yard touchdown pass capped it to Jim McFarland. But it was a fantastic 51-yard field goal by Paul Rogers with only 21 seconds left in the game that brought the sensational victory over the Cowboys 13-10. Utah, now a starter quarterback Ernie Sigler wasted no time handing off to Mike Green, who plunges in for the first Nebraska touchdown. And watch here as linebacker Jerry Murtaugh dives in for a quarterback sack and a resultant loss. Sigler, who was 8 for 12 and 165 yards passing, hits this one to Dick Davis. And Davis, who had a fine afternoon on the ground, had 204 total yards. An impressive Husker shutout. The final 31-0. Minnesota, and the Gophers scored early in the game, but the Huskers didn't fold. Ernie Sigler to Jim McFarland, who struggles to the 3-yard line. Then it's Joe Arduna punching in with the first Nebraska touchdown with only 43 seconds remaining in the first half. Watch now a fine defensive play by Dana Stevenson. He picks off a Gopher pass, returns it 28 yards to the Gopher 17. Three plays later, Sigler to McFarland again. And Jim twists in for another Nebraska touchdown. The Huskers' third win. The Huskers and Jayhawks collide in a rugged conference opener. Joe Arduna turns it on, cuts back, and runs 28 yards for Nebraska's first touchdown. Arduna here on the receiving end of a Sigler pass. Also was the Huskers' top rusher for the day with 98 yards. Watch as Dick Davis cuts back to the right to pick up more valuable yardage for the Huskers. Once more, down close, Arduna's turn, and he responds with another Husker touchdown. Despite the fine effort, Kansas Orange Bowl bound. Now Missouri at Lincoln, and the Huskers began the explosion with a 45-yard pass, Ernie Sigler to Tom Penny. A good run after the catch that takes him all the way to the Tigers 17. The Huskers keep the pressure on. Fine runs by Arduna and Davis.
There was a lot of rumors, some which I heard and some which were kept from me, that maybe I should think about other employment other than coaching.
Final 16-14 Mizzou. In Stillwater, Nebraska needed still another comeback to get on the winning track once again. Fourth quarter, the Huskers came to life, marching 80 yards in 16 plays. Joe Arduna netted 145 yards on the ground. Ernie Sigler, 141 aerial yards. Watch as fullback Dick Davis pounds his way to the Cowboy 5. Only 57 seconds remain in the game. Ernie Sigler to Jim McFarland for the touchdown. And Paul Rogers' extra point is the winning margin, 21-20 Nebraska. Next week at Ames, the Huskers took the opening kickoff, drove 75 yards on some brilliant passing, Ernie Sigler to Mick Ziegler. Joe Arduna piling up 72 yards for his day's work, including this 2-yard touchdown run, as the Huskers battle for a solid win.
We lost at homecoming to Kansas State here, which was somewhat unheard of, and especially in front of the homecoming fans. And Kansas State, however, did have a good football team. The quarterback that played for Kansas State at that time, Dickey, is still playing quarterback in the National Pro League for the Green Bay Packers.
An aroused Nebraska team shook off the Kansas State loss, storming back at Boulder. Nebraska's best offensive and defensive performance of the year. As the Huskers rushed for 228 yards, Guy Ingles returned a buff punt for a 62-yard touchdown run. No stopping the Huskers. They win it 22-6.
We ended up the season on a dismal note. We played Oklahoma on Thanksgiving Day in front of a national television audience, and they beat us badly. Steve Owens, their Heisman Trophy candidate, scored the last touchdown in that game, so they really didn't pull their horses off or anything.
Nebraska's fine offensive guard Joe Armstrong receives All-America honors. 1969, Nebraska's Cornhuskers, with a rebuilt squad minus Joe Orduna, opened the season against mighty Southern Cal. A 36-yard run by Larry Frost got the Huskers rolling, but the Trojans came on to win by 10. Defense was becoming a Nebraska trademark, and the Husker Blackshirts really got rolling against Texas A&M. They took over to shut out the Aggies for the first time in 26 games. Quarterback Jerry Taggy started the Huskers on a 93-yard drive, then scored the clinching touchdown. The Huskers 14-0. At Minnesota, Jeff Kinney throwing a rare halfback pass to Guy Ingles to tie the score. Then it was Taggy, a 38-yard touchdown pass to Larry Frost as the first half came to an end. The Huskers wrapped up the scoring on this 24-yard run by Jeff Hughes as Nebraska piled up 587 yards in total offense, second best in their history. In Columbia, Missouri again proved to be a formidable opponent. In the third quarter, Jerry Taggy a short pass to Jeff Kinney, breaking 2 tackles and sprinting 77 yards to score. Nebraska battled desperately to keep pace with the Tigers' scoring machine. But it wasn't to be. The Tigers prevailed. The Huskers were now 2-2, final 17-7.
In 1969, probably the turning point of whether our career was going to continue and be good, we came from behind to beat Kansas in Lincoln.
The Blackshirts did their part in getting the ball back for the offense with time running out, sacking the quarterback for KU. Then the Huskers moved 88 yards and scored the winning TD with only 1:22 left in the ballgame to win 21-17. Although Jerry Taggy rammed in the first score of the game during the second quarter, defense turned out to be the name of the game, as the Husker defensive platoon held the Cowboys to only 43 yards on the ground. Van Brownson passed 3 for 5 and scampered well enough to add to the total offense for NU, 397 yards. Brownson also fired a 47-yard scoring bomb to Guy Ingles to cap off Nebraska's scoring. The Huskers win it 13-3. Colorado was next to feel the Blackshirt sting. Dana Stevenson intercepting 3 buff passes for the day. The Husker defense was awesome on the ground, stopping Colorado star Bob Anderson, holding him to just 42 rushing yards for the afternoon. Offensively, the Huskers totaled 253 yards. Here, Guy Ingles retreats to throw a block as Dan Schneis takes a Brownson pass for a 27-yard touchdown. 20-7 Huskers. Nebraska wound up with a record-breaking home season and a convincing victory over Iowa State. The NU offense opened up with Jerry Tagge throwing for 93 yards, Jeff Kinney running for 49 yards. On the ground and in the air, the Huskers continue to move the football. Mike Green takes a 19-yard pass from Tagge for the final Nebraska score. Nebraska's defensive specialists next put the clamps on Lynn Dickey and the improved Wildcats of Kansas State, holding them to just 73 yards on the ground. Dan Schneis for 34 yards on a screen pass from Van Brownson carries to the Wildcat 14. Brownson sneaks over for the winning touchdown and another NU victory. Nebraska climaxed what most called Coach Bob Devaney's finest season by thrashing the Sooners and clinching a tie with Missouri for the Big 8 championship. NU's defense stopped Heisman Trophy winner Steve Owens with 71 yards rushing and no touchdowns. Offensively, Jeff Kinney had 127 yards rushing. Jerry Tagge 4 for 4 and 73 yards. And Van Brownson got miles of exercise as he scampered back and forth, running away from pursuers. Shades of the great Bobby Reynolds. A great moment for the Huskers, for Coach Bob Devaney and his staff, and a return to the Big 8 throne after a 2-year absence. The Huskers over Oklahoma, 44-14.
Go, go, go.
Now the Sun Bowl at El Paso, Texas. Nebraska dominated the University of Georgia. A record 4 field goals by place kicker Paul Rogers in the first quarter. The Blackshirts shut off the Bulldog attack.
And the players who played on that team went on. They were sophomores, and they went on and did a great job in 70 and 71. And there was great satisfaction derived from this turnabout. And, of course, we changed our offense, so we started to run the I formation. And I think changing to the I and then to a spread formation really exploited the talent that we had.
This sensational victory evened Coach Bob Devaney's Nebraska Bowl count at 3-3 and capped a fine 9-2 season, including a Big 8 co-championship. The Huskers take home the Sun Bowl trophy with a lopsided win over Georgia. 1970 in the season opener with Wake Forest. Joe Arduna got the Big Red scoring machine in gear as he plunged in for the touchdown. Jerry Tagge turns the corner for another score just before the half ends. Now it's Arduna again, scampering for a 20-yard touchdown run. Nebraska on its way to a decisive opening win. The fireworks started in the LA Coliseum as quarterback Jerry Tagge finds Johnny Rodgers for a touchdown. On the ground, NU gained 208 yards for the night, a total offense of 365 yards, Southern Cal 366 yards. NU's defense continued the black shirt tradition with a sack and loss on a Trojan play. The Husker offense again went into action. Joe Arduna rips off a great run, and the Cornhuskers led briefly before the Trojans came back to tie it up. Neither team could score again. The final score 21-21 tie. The Army came calling at Lincoln, and Nebraska took a while to get warmed up after a scoreless first quarter. But they finally got on track, 451 total yards in offense. Leading rushers, Joe Arduna with 89 yards. Jeff Kinney posting 52 yards. Nebraska's defense was superb all day long, holding Army to only 18 yards rushing, 26 yards in the air. The Huskers thoroughly dominating the Cadets, racking up the season's only shutout. Next, the Huskers traveled to Minnesota, and a crowd of 52,000 watched Nebraska score on 7 long drives, piling up over 400 yards of offense. The black shirt defense lived up to its reputation with key interceptions and nifty returns. Time after time. Watch this one. Nebraska's 6th straight win over Minnesota. Bob Devaney's mastery over the Big Ten was now 9-0. The final, 35-10. And now Missouri. And this game was a defensive battle for 3 quarters until NU's offensive machine exploded. Jeff Kinney had a field day as the Huskers' leading rusher with 108 yards. Jerry Taggy passing to Kinney for 12 yards and a touchdown. The defense and Dave Wallin stacking up the Tigers. Joe Orduna with a fine run to set up still another Husker touchdown. Van Brownson punched in from the 1, Nebraska 21-7. Now Kansas and the Cornhuskers, stunned by an early Jayhawk surge, had to fight from behind once again. Van Brownson brought the crowd to their feet with an 80-yard touchdown pass to Guy Ingles. Ingles outrunning everybody, and the Jayhawks were reeling. Brownson also gets back into the running act with a 15-yard scamper for still another score, as the Huskers wrap up their second Big 8 win, 41-20. Oklahoma State and the Huskers run wild in Lincoln, piling up the most points since 1922. John Adkins gets it going with a pass interception and a 57-yard run. Joe Orduna racked up 49 yards for the day. Here's one of his 3 touchdowns. The black shirts swarm the Cowboy quarterback, forcing a hurried throw. John Decker picks it off, runs 73 yards for the score. The number 4 ranked Huskers amass 545 yards, and the black shirts hold the Pokes to 64 yards on the ground. Final 65-31, Nebraska. At Boulder and on nationwide television, Nebraska struck early in the game. Quarterback Van Brownson throwing a 40-yard TD pass to Guy Ingles. Little Eddie Perriard is the immovable object in a quarterback sack. And although Joe Orduna was the leading rusher for the day with 58 yards, Huskers' Jeff Kinney, with a dazzling kickoff return, brought the crowd to their feet. All the way to the Colorado 22-yard line. Kinney again, a 7-yard touchdown run. And the fired-up Cornhuskers wrapped up their 7th win of the year, 29-13. In Ames, Joe Orduna again sets the pace as the Huskers strike quickly. 2 first-quarter touchdowns. The Blackshirts also in top form. A Husker interception by linebacker Bob Terrio and a fine run back. Jerry Taggy connects on 18 of 27 passes for 223 yards. Husker safety Bill Cush with a fine defensive grab. The Nebraska Cornhuskers remain unbeaten, racking up a total offense of 565 yards. Now Kansas State in the Big 8 showdown of the year. The unbeaten champion Huskers without starting quarterback Van Brumson. Jerry Murtaugh fires up the Blackshirts, grabbing off a Lynn Dickey pass and returning it to the Wildcat 30. Then Johnny Rogers with a Jerry Taggy handoff and a 30-yard run for the first Nebraska touchdown. The Blackshirts continue to swarm. Joe Blaha snags another Dickey toss and brings it back up the field. Nebraska has defeated the Big 8's best defensive team 51-13. And now Oklahoma. And as usual, this was a big one. The Huskers hoping to wrap up an unbeaten season. Jerry Taggy with some fine runs and also 14 of 22 in the air for 200 yards. Joe Arduna raced for 66 total yards and 1 touchdown. Although the Cornhuskers had to twice come from behind, poise and determination paid off. In whipping the Sooners for the second straight year, Nebraska achieved its first unbeaten season since 1965 and the second of Devaney's tenure. The Huskers also earned a repeat Big 8 title, its 6th in the last 8 years. And it's now on to the Orange Bowl. Bob Devaney gets a ride, and the scoreboard reads 28-21 Nebraska. Orange Bowl night. The opponent, Louisiana State. The Cornhuskers, fired up by the news that number 1 Texas and number 2 Ohio State had both lost bowl games, struck quickly. As usual, Nebraska's defense was awesome. Willie Harper covering a fumble at the 15-yard line. Joe Arduna rips off a 3-yard run, and the Huskers have their first touchdown. The defense stayed tough. Jerry Taggy made the most of every opportunity as the Cornhuskers passed, ran over and through the Tigers. Taggy connected on 12 of 15 passes for 153 yards. Ran tough, directed the Huskers in his usual expert fashion. The Green Bay native would receive the most valuable back trophy. And watch again this now famous plunge from the 1. Arms high over the pile. The Tigers tried to battle back, but the Blackshirts were everywhere. National champions Bob Newton and Jerry Murtaugh winning All-America honors, and the Huskers finish an unbeaten season.
The University of Nebraska, 1970 football team, champions of the Big 8 Conference, victor in the 1971 Orange Bowl, and picked by the Associated Press number 1 team of the nation.
(1971), and the defending national champions opened in Lincoln with a convincing win over Pac-8 power Oregon. The NU defense held the Potent Ducks to only 86 yards rushing, 118 yards through the air. And the Husker offense flashed great opening form. Nebraska's 20th straight game without a defeat. Now Minnesota. Wingback Johnny Rogers caught 3 Jerry Taggy passes for touchdowns, and Nebraska rolled to their 7th straight win over the Golden Gophers. Rogers into the receiving record book, tying Clarence Swanson's 1921 record. Taggy's 233 yards of total offense and Rogers' 126 yards in receptions were the individual highlights. Next up, Texas A&M. The number 1 Huskers scored from almost everywhere. A crowd of 68,000 cheered as Nebraska fullback Bill Olds opened the scoring with a 67-yard sprint down the sidelines. The Husker defense continued to shine. Joe Blaha on a 1-1 hit and an Aggie loss. But the day's most sensational tally was still to come. A 98-yard kickoff return by future Heisman Award winner Johnny Rodgers. The Blackshirts had a field day. Bill Cush intercepts an Aggie pass and heads for the end zone. The Huskers win another one by a lot. Final score 34-7. Utah State and the Huskers' fourth straight home game of the season. Quarterback Jerry Tagge revved up the scoring machine with a pass play to Bill Olds and a 14-yard touchdown. Utah State denied the Blackshirts their much sought-after shutout, but were held to 89 yards rushing, 138 yards in the air as they took their first loss. Utah State falls to the Cornhuskers 42-6. Missouri's Tigers shut out Nebraska in the first quarter, something no one else could do. But then the Huskers caught fire, driving 67 yards in 14 plays to break the deadlock. Jeff Kinney getting the touchdown. Another awesome showing by the Huskers. They raced for 334 yards, passed for 269 more, a total offense of 603 yards. Meanwhile, the Blackshirts were tremendous, holding Missouri to only 9 yards rushing and passing for a total of 113 yards. Nebraska's 24th game without defeat and their 15th straight victory. 36-0 Huskers. Homecoming, and there's Johnny. Nebraska's Blackshirts went on a record rampage. The offense had another field day, and the Cornhuskers simply delighted the homecomers. So potent was the NU defense, Kansas was held to a record minus 42 yards rushing and only 56 yards total offense. Oklahoma State. Nebraska's defense continued to sparkle, completely bottling up the Cowboys. But the offensive thrills came when Johnny Rodgers did it one more time. A 92-yard record-breaking punt return for the game's final touchdown. The Blackshirts did what they usually do. The final score, 41-13 Huskers. In their toughest test to date, the Cornhuskers ripped Colorado before a national TV audience. The passing arm of Jerry Tagge, the running of Jeff Kinney, the kicking of Rich Sanger, and the usual Husker rock rib defense proved just too much for the Buffs. Nebraska the winner, 31-7. Iowa State came to Lincoln, and Nebraska closed its home season with a blast against the Cyclones. The leading rusher was Bill Olds with 80 total yards, most of them on this fine run. But the big thrill? You're right. The young man Bob Devaney calls the finest football player he ever coached. Johnny Rodgers. One more time and a thing of beauty. 6 more Husker points. A 62-yard weaving, twisting punt return. The Huskers 37-0. Kansas State in the record book continued to take a beating. Jerry Tagge and Johnny Rodgers helped lock up Nebraska's 29th game without a defeat. Jeff Kinney set a Nebraska record with touchdown number 29. The Blackshirts continued to stop the Wildcats again and again. And Nebraska was once again ready for the big shootout in November. They billed it as the game of the decade, but it came across as the game of the century. Number 1 Nebraska against number 2 Oklahoma, the largest television audience to watch a college football game. And that never-to-be-forgotten magnificent punt run back by Nebraska's great Johnny Rodgers. And one perfectly timed final block by Bob Terrio. Oklahoma quarterback Jack Mildren, in a magnificent performance, engineered a Sooner offense that totaled 467 yards to Nebraska's 362. But the Huskers had some dazzlers of their own. A dime a dozen were the highlights. Jeff Kinney, 171 yards and 4 touchdowns. Jerry Taggy at the helm all the way, stoking the Husker fires with excellence and authority. Rich Glover's 22 tackles tabbed the greatest job by a defensive lineman ever seen by many. Larry Jacobson's awesome pass rushes and the marvelous black shirts holding All-America Greg Pruitt to only 53 yards rushing. Truly, the game of the century.
Who's number 1? All right.
Jerry, the team's been building up for this game all season.
Oh, I'll
As
think.
tough to you personally as you thought they'd be?
Oh, definitely. I think we were kind of disappointed ourselves in the first half. We didn't move the ball very well.
It was a hard-fought game and the best team won. We knew we were number 1 all along.
Well, I'm so happy. I don't know what to say. Cry or laugh or hard. I can hardly breathe. I'm so happy right now.
What are you going to do now to prepare for the Orange Bowl?
Well, right now we're going to go to Y and have a little game over there and kind of relax, play a good football game over there, come back, get ready for Alabama.
I think this here means more to us now than winning the Orange Bowl last year when we were national champions then, because we feel we're national champions right now. Right now. And ain't nobody stopping us. This year, next year either. Hey, you had a great run back there on that. You got in a little trouble down there. How'd you get out of it? I got scared.
Well, I'm glad we have an opportunity to play against a wishbone offense. It should give us some help in preparing our defense for Alabama.
What was the greatest turning point in this game today?
Well, it's certainly the last drive that we made to come from behind and score.
Coach Bob Devaney, voted Coach of the Year by the Football Writers Association of America and by the Washington Touchdown Club.
A trip to the islands and a 45-3 win over Hawaii. Then to Miami, the Orange Bowl, and the game some called the second game of the century. Another national championship showdown between number 1 and number 2, Nebraska and Alabama. The game was barely underway when the Huskers erased all doubt that this was to be their year of years, their season of seasons.
This bunch of guys were great people, and they were great on the football field, and they had a lot of confidence in their team and a certain amount of belief in themselves. And they were a bunch of people that we hated to see leave. They did a great job for us on the field and off the field.
Demoralized, Alabama fumbled 5 times. The Huskers dominated everybody's All-America selections, and rightly so. Players like Jerry Taggy, Johnny Rodgers, Jeff Kinney, Rich Glover, Larry Jacobson, Willie Harper, and probably a few more who just missed. Coach Bob Devaney announced that he would relinquish his coaching duties and become athletic director after the 1972 season. During his 10 years at the helm, his teams compiled a fantastic 92-18-1 record, won 7 Big 8 titles, 4 straight from 1963 and 3 straight since 1969, and are in the midst of a 2-year reign as national champions. It's no secret Devaney would like to achieve one more goal in his final campaign. That is, of course, become the first coach and school to win 3 straight national titles. The Orange Bowl game of 1972 was an anticlimactic victory in the wake of the Oklahoma contest, but nevertheless, the Nebraska Cornhuskers celebrated one of the most convincing and satisfying victories ever. They were number 1, and there were no more questions. '72 found Nebraska ranked number 1 in the preseason polls to open the season, seeking its 3rd straight national title. But that 32-game victory string was abruptly snapped by UCLA in the opener, the first loss for the Huskers in 33 games, dating back to the Missouri game of 1969. It also snapped a 23-game winning streak, both marks tops in the nation. A late 30-yard field goal with only 22 seconds left in the game gave the Bruins the victory. Stunned by UCLA the week before, Nebraska's Cornhuskers bounced back in convincing fashion against Texas A&M, driving 86 yards for its first touchdown. Quarterback Steve Runty showing fine form. As always, Bill Olds ran tough. And here Runty with a 12-yard flip for a touchdown to Rich Baugh. The Black Shirts served notice that things were to continue tough for rival offenses. They held A&M to only 75 yards rushing. The Huskers still able to move the football, 468 yards in total offense, well balanced, 252 yards on the ground, 215 in the air. Mark it down. Nebraska definitely on its way back. The final score, the Huskers 37, Texas A&M 7. The following week at West Point, Army's outmanned cadets absorbed a 77-7 pounding from the Huskers, who then came home to meet Minnesota. An awesome offensive attack, a tenacious defense, and Nebraska simply ran wild. Johnny Rodgers, the offensive player of the game, totaled 290 total yards for the day. How sweet it was. Fears that an open date might take the edge off Nebraska's momentum were all wrong. The Big Red Machine proved better than ever. The Tigers completely outmanned. 8 different Huskers scored in the game. Gary Dixon got 2 touchdowns. Dave Humm and Steve Runty shared the quarterbacking duties and combined for a new Nebraska single-game passing yardage record of 329 yards. The Huskers simply rolled to their 4th straight win and their 2nd straight shutout. The final, 62-0. Kansas managed to blank Nebraska in the opening quarter, but then the Huskers exploded. Dave Humm and a 30-yard touchdown pass to Frosty Anderson. Humm right back with a 72-yard scoring bomb to Johnny the Jet Rodgers. Humm was to wind up as NU's total offensive leader with 278 yards. A big day for the Black Shirts as well, racking up their 3rd straight shutout. In 3 straight games, Nebraska had outscored Minnesota, Missouri, and Kansas 157-0. Nebraska met its toughest hurdle since the opening game, but the Black Shirts were determined to make this their 4th straight shutout. Oklahoma State the victim, as the Husker offense had its biggest yardage day of the year, 566 total yards. Everything worked for the Huskers, and the Cowboys fell 34-0. Colorado was next, and the Huskers turned in their finest game of the season, scoring the first 3 times they touched the football. What a show Nebraska put on, with the national television audience again looking in. Bill Olds rushed for 76 yards. Gary Dixon ran for 94. And the Huskers' total offense for the day, 349 yards. As Colorado gambled at their 45, Jim Branch blasted in to nail the quarterback. Johnny Rodgers, again named NU's Offensive Player of the Game, as he danced his way down the sideline and into the record books. 33-10 the Huskers. Nebraska's hopes for a third straight national title were dashed the following week. Husker plans for at least a tie for the Big 8 title, given a frustrating jolt by the Cyclones. Dave Humm gets the Huskers on the board with his scamper for a touchdown. Humm, the total offense leader, with 199 yards. Johnny Rodgers, again NU's Offensive Player of the Game. But all in all, Nebraska's poorest showing of the season. With just 23 seconds left, Keith Krepfle caught a cyclone bomb for the tying touchdown. Final 23-23. As the snowflakes fell at Memorial Stadium, John the Jet got Nebraska rolling with his 52-yard punt return for a touchdown. Moments later, it was Rodgers again, popping in from the 8-yard line. And the Blackshirts continued to give the opposition fits. Bob Thornton with a fine goal line interception and run back. Jeff Moran, whose 72-yard run set up another touchdown, led all rushers for the day. And there was one more significant happening. Win number 100 for Coach Bob Devaney. The Huskers over K-State 59-7. Oklahoma, a stadium record crowd 76,000 plus, Thanksgiving Day 1972, millions more watching on national TV. But Nebraska found the going mighty tough against the fired-up Sooners. Bill Olds ran 14 yards for the first Husker touchdown. Dave Humm was 10 of 33 for 104 yards on the day. But all in vain for the Huskers. It turned out to be their first loss at home since 1969 and their second loss anywhere in 3 years. Oklahoma, 17-14.
And it's hard to put your finger on one or two players and say you have to stop them to stop Notre Dame. They have a fine defensive front four, and they have some backs out there in the secondary that go after that football tough. And offensively, they have the greatest variety of offense and present more problems than any team we've faced so far. And I think they're a fine football team.
If there was any doubt about Johnny Rodgers' Heisman credentials, the Jet erased them all the night of January 1, 1973 in Miami, leading a devastating attack on the Fighting Irish as the Cornhuskers annexed their third straight Orange Bowl trophy. Coach Bob Devaney unveiled a surprise move on Notre Dame, shifting Rodgers from wingback to I-back, and the results were explosive. Rodgers rushed for 81 yards, and when he racked up his fourth touchdown, he established a new Orange Bowl record for total points and for touchdowns scored.
John Rodgers was the best football player that I believe I ever coached. And John had tremendous ability, and he had tremendous desire to be the best. And he worked very hard to get that way.
Gary Dixon also had an impressive showing, 69 rushing yards. Watch it again from a different angle and note the blocking that opened the hole. Dave Humm on target. Johnny Rodgers doing his thing again. A few plays later, Dave Humm flipped a lateral to Rodgers, who lofted a perfect pass to Frosty Anderson, a 52-yard touchdown play. There were All-Americas almost everywhere you looked, most of them wearing the scarlet and cream. Darrell White, Willie Harper, Rich Glover, and of course, Johnny Rodgers. Rodgers and his fired-up band of Cornhuskers had proven once again that they were indeed one of the finest teams in the nation. And they're coached by the winningest coach in the nation, who caps a brilliant career with a masterful win over a fine Notre Dame team. The final, the Huskers over Notre Dame, 40-6. John the Jet, the Heisman Award winner for a phenomenal season. And Husker fans will never, never tire of watching the stunning punt return that turned the tide when Nebraska beat Oklahoma in the game of the century. You remember this, I'm sure. John Rodgers, top vote getter for the Heisman Award, nosing out Greg Pruitt of Oklahoma, and look who's third, Rich Glover of Nebraska. And here is the much-coveted Heisman Award trophy. When opponents saw number 75, they knew he came to play. Everybody's All-American, Larry Jacobson of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, one of the finest ever Husker interior linemen, here with the sack of Jack Mildren in the game of the century. Jacobson again, watch the left tackle spot. No place to go, and the quarterback swallowed up back at midfield. Big and strong and smart. Not fooled by this play. Larry Jacobson of Nebraska, number 75. Outland Award winner, 1971. The following year, a young man from Jersey City, New Jersey, wore number 79 for the Huskers. And if you watched at home the game of the century, you probably remember Oklahoma coach Bud Wilkinson in awe of his 22-tackle performance against Bud's former Charges. Rich Glover, number 79, and watch him go. Winner of the Lombardi Trophy and the Outland Trophy, the top lineman in the nation, 1972. When Bob Devaney moved from the head coach's office to become athletic director, his first big decision, to whom could he pass the torch? Who could carry on the Devaney winning tradition? Why Tom Osborne, Coach?
Tom started out as a graduate assistant coach. He was working on his doctorate at the University of Nebraska. He had left pro football and had been quite a successful pro football player, just decided that he wanted to go on and continue his education. And at first, he had a rather minor role. I don't think we paid him anything except let him eat at the training table for a couple of years there. And then gradually, we got to appreciate his football mind and the way he worked with people, and he just gradually grew to the point where everybody gained a tremendous amount of respect for him. Tom is a real fine football coach. In fact, I think Tom's the best football coach in this country, and I've said that before, and I really mean that. And I think as long as he stays at the helm of Nebraska football, we're going to be in contention for the Big Eight and possibly the national championship every year.